I'm going to tell them this story. And it's called The Two Pickpockets. And it's also from England. There was a pickpocket, and he was very good. He would have been very rich, but he lived out in the country, and there weren't just that many pockets to pick. So he thought to himself, you know, if I move to the city, if I move into London, I'll be very, very successful. And so he did. And he was, in months, he was richer than he ever thought he could be. And one day he was plying his trade when he felt his pocket had been picked. He looked and he saw a beautiful blonde woman rushing away from him. And he thought, oh, she's the one that picked my pocket. And he followed her and he got his wallet back. But he knew she must be very talented as well, because nobody else could have gotten that close to him. So he proposed to her that they work together. And with the two of them working together, they would be far more wealthy. And they were. Before long, they had more money than either of them could have ever considered. And he got to thinking, you know, we're both very good at what we do, but if we two married and had a child who had the talent of both parents, how much more successful could he be? And so again he proposed, and again she accepted. And by they had a beautiful baby boy with his mother's blonde hair and blue eyes, just incredibly gorgeous, but all was not well with that baby. His arm was twisted, and it looked almost as if it was coming out of his chest. Well, they were alarmed. A pickpocket with a paralyzed right arm wasn't going to be much of a pickpocket. So they took him to a doctor, and doctor said, well, he's far too young to do anything. You'll have to wait. But they didn't want to wait, and so they took him to another doctor, and finally, because they were so wealthy, they took him to the very best pediatrician in all of England. And the doctor pulled out his gold watch, and he checked the pulse in the good wrist. And then he checked the pulse in the paralyzed arm, and scratched his whiskers and said, well, that's odd. There's equal blood flow to both limbs. Oh, look at that baby. It's such a shame. Look how alert he is that something like this should happen to him. Why, look at how his eyes follow my watch. And he pulled his watch out of his pocket and he swung it back and forth, and that baby looked. And he followed that watch back and forth, and his arm began to tremble. And he followed that watch, and right before their eyes, his arm began to straighten out, and he was looking at that watch, and the arm became straighter and straighter, and his fingers began to uncurl to reach out for that watch, and that's when it fell out. The midwife's golden wedding ring. Those kind of stories just really, those little bitty ones.
You don't expect that.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to grab the watch maybe or something.
Yeah, but he really was the best pickpocket in the world.
I think we have about 10 minutes left. I just want to let you know so you can time things a little bit.
Let's see. See if I can. Oh, I don't know. I know that'll take too long. I have to think stories through in my head.
We could just give a little. You have some contact information if people wanted to get a hold of you.
They can get hold of me through my email address, which is ladust@consolidated.net. I do have a MySpace page and a MySpace music page. Under MySpace music, it's Linda Dust Singer Storyteller, I believe. And you can get all sorts of contact information there and upcoming events, which either the guild or I as an individual are participating in.
And we did talk about an upcoming event, October 24th and 25th, I believe.
Yes, it's down in it's still central Illinois, but it's kind of down in the hills and hollers on South Route 51, south of Pana. It's called the In Plain Air Music and Arts Festival, and it was started by friends of mine on their farm, and it's the focal point of the whole place is this rustic hand-hewn log cabin that we use as a stage. You can come and do camping, but I mean, there's no electricity. It's really primitive.
They
But
have porta potties or anything?
oh yeah, yep. And yeah, but we really have had a lot of fun this year. I have a heater for my tent, though I learned my lesson last year, and but we play and there's demonstrations of I know we're going to have a blacksmith and possibly some spinners and a lot of there are trails to hike. They'll be doing the black powder rifles shooting and hatchet throwing and all sorts of different. We have a woodworker that uses only 18th century tools. That he does some amazing stuff with that.
Yeah.
And
Sounds nice.
I asked him about sanding something one time. I guess I insulted him. He says, you know, if you cut it right, you don't ever have to sand. But so that's really become a really fun thing to do. I was trying to think of another song. That's too depressing. Let's do a story. This story is called Just Enough. There was once a king who had a tailor who fitted the king out with the most wonderful clothes. Everybody was very proud of how their king was always so perfectly dressed and well turned out. But they couldn't say the same about the tailor. He didn't take too much care of his personal appearance. He was always so worried about how the king looked, he really didn't care about himself. Well, people began to talk. Is this the way our royal tailor should present himself? This is kind of insulting. And word got back to the king, and the king thought, well, you know, maybe it's because all the cloth he gets, he makes clothes for me. If I present him with a bolt of cloth as a gift, maybe that will give him the idea to dress nicer. So the king called for the tailor and presented him with the most beautiful bolt of golden yellow, soft as velvet corduroy the tailor had ever seen. And he said, this is a gift to you. Make something for yourself. The tailor took it home and he rolled it out on his cutting table and he looked at it this way and he looked at it that way and said, I have just enough. And he clipped and he snipped and he cut and he stitched and he sewed and he folded, and the next day he had the most beautiful golden yellow, soft as velvet coat that anyone had ever seen. And he wore that coat and people were amazed. They said, why, that is the most beautiful coat I've ever seen. I've never seen a coat so beautiful. I wish I had a coat like that. And the tailor wore that coat. He was very proud. And he wore it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, until it didn't look so pretty. And he took it home and he knew he should probably throw it away, but he laid it out on his cutting table and he looked at it this way and he looked at it that way and he said, I have just enough. So he clipped and he snipped and he sewed and he stitched and he folded, and the next day he had the most beautiful, soft as velvet, golden yellow vest that anybody had ever seen. And he wore it, and people went, why, I've never seen a vest quite so beautiful. That is the most beautiful vest I've ever seen. Wish I had a vest like that. Taylor was very proud, and he wore it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, until there was nothing to be very proud of. And he knew he should throw it away. But he took it home and he laid it out on his table. And he looked at it this way and he looked at it that way and went, I am just enough. And he clipped and he snipped and he stitched and he sewed and he folded, and the next day he had the most beautiful golden yellow, soft as velvet bow tie that anyone had ever seen. And he wore that and he was very proud, and they said, look at that bow tie. Why, I've never seen a bow tie quite that pretty. I wish I had a bow tie like that. And he wore it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, and it was a mess. And he knew he should throw it away, but he took it home and he laid it out and he looked at it this way and he looked at it that way, and I think I have just enough. And he clipped and he snipped and he stitched and he sewed and he folded, and the next day he had the most beautiful golden yellow, soft as velvet button that anyone had seen. I said, well, look at that button. Oh, I've never seen a button quite so beautiful. I wish I had a button like that. And he wore it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, until there was just not much left. And he brought it home and he laid it out on his cutting table and he looked at it this way and he looked at it that way. Looked at it this way again and that way. And he said, I have just enough. Well, there was really only one thing he could make out of it, and that was a story. And he shared it with all of his friends, and I've just shared it with you.
Very good.
Now you have a choice. If you want to have that story for your own, you can tell it 3 times in the next 2 days. And you will always have a story to tell. But if you don't, I'll keep it for you. You can come get it from any time.
Thank you.